Capcom's remake of Resident Evil 2 is coming along.
We've seen gameplay of Leon and Claire at Gamescom, but what do we think?
Hot take. One of the most well-known franchises in Capcom's back pocket is the Biohazard series, also known as Resident Evil. And now we're seeing a new remake for 2, which looks pretty amazing.
Yeah, so we had a remaster of Resident Evil back in 2015, and it was a remaster of the GameCube remake.
Yes.
And that remaster went over so well. It felt like it was about 6 months later that Capcom came out and said, hey, we're going to be doing a remake of Resident Evil 2, but it's going to take some time. And actually, the time seemed like it flew by pretty quick.
Yeah,
even though it has been a couple of years. I thought that it had been announced closer to Resident Evil 7, but it was Resident Evil 7's release. But Resident Evil 7 actually came out in 2017.
Yeah.
So it's been a few years.
Yeah. I mean, what I've been so excited about seeing this is that, look, when Resident Evil originally came out, it had a very cheesy quality to it. You know what?
Yeah.
But I mean, that was on purpose. They knew that at the time with the PlayStation, they couldn't really achieve the creepiness that they wanted to get. There are creepy elements to it, but I would argue
that first zombie reveal.
Yeah. I would argue that when you're really looking for for really strange, kind of very bizarre gameplay that kind of influences you on a psychological level, that's more or less what Silent Hill was trying to achieve.
Yes.
And even then, all of those games on the PlayStation and that era always seemed to have a little bit of a weird quality to them that never made them feel authentic enough to like a full-on horror experience.
Right. But there always was, despite it having that B-movie quality, there always was a sense of like dread.
Yes.
In every Resident Evil game, where like we were talking about a little bit previously, was the opening doors in Resident Evil, right? You had that anticipation. It felt like throughout all of Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3, there's always this like sort of looming like darkness. And the series has evolved a little bit over time, and we've seen Resident Evil take some different directions with its games. So we saw, like, Resident Evil 4 was huge, right? It did a lot of things differently. It had the camera like over the arm, over the right arm, and we had that sort of like 2/3 of the screen that we could see, and Leon was on the left.
Yes.
And we started getting a more action-y Resident Evil with 4, but it still had a lot of like slow, sort of lumbering moments, scary moments to it.
Yeah, I really feel that with the progression of technology and the way that video game consoles have evolved, game developers have been given more access to more features and have been able to create different experiences based upon that. The original Resident Evil is basically a tank-like shooter where you're walking around from room to room in a pre-rendered background environment.
It's so interesting because the limitations that were on that first Resident Evil made it so scary.
Yes.
Those tank controls, the horrible like up and down aiming that you had, and like I said, like the load screens, all of those things were because of the limitations at the time, but they made the game what it was, right?
Yes. And you lose that in Resident Evil 4 because you have better control.
Right. So like I was saying, Resident Evil 4 was segueing the series into kind of a more action-y style of game. So we saw Resident Evil 5 where you had some couch co-op if you wanted, and you were throwing ammo back and forth. But it became a more action-y style game. Resident Evil 6 tried to take some of its roots and have some slower gameplay. I believe it was with Leon's campaign. There were multiple campaigns in 6, but there were still some other campaigns that felt a little bit more action-y, and I believe Capcom saw a little bit of pushback from fans that, hey, we want to be scared, right? That's what Resident Evil was to us back in the day. So we saw the remaster come out in 2015. A lot of people loved it. A lot of people picked it up. And then we saw Resident Evil 7. It came out. And then it was very different in a way, right? But it still, it went back to, I would say RE1 in that it did have that slowness to it. You didn't know what was around every corner. They had these great sort of jump scare moments and things. So yeah, it seems like the series went through this wave, right, of slowness to like fast action, and then back to the sort of more reserved and then jump scare moments. And it seems like Capcom is like, okay, no, this is where we need to be. People seem to really be digging into the horror aspects, the slow horror aspects.
That's exactly it. What we've seen so far of the footage that they've shown off is that this idea that Resident Evil 2 no longer has the limitations of the older technology, of the older way of thinking. So you're seeing a different scope here. You're seeing gameplay you never saw in the original. This is simply not just taking what was something that existed and just putting a new skin on it or updating the background textures. It looks scarier. It looks darker. It looks far more graphic. And when I mean graphic, I mean violent. Like, it definitely looks like something that is trying to be far more serious.
Right. So some of the gameplay footage that we did see for Leon was especially graphic. Coming out of Gamescom, there was like a shudder scene with someone getting, dismembered.
Yeah.
And I don't remember that from the original Resident Evil 2. It makes me really wonder how much of that original RE2 game is going to be represented in this remake, because, man, like, so much of this has changed that like they have almost like a blank slate, let's say, because we're going from a very directed sort of experience with RE2 in that we had those pre-rendered backgrounds, right, and things were placed specific ways. Now you have full camera control. It looks like it plays like RE4. So this is like, to me, this doesn't just feel like a remaster of a Resident Evil game. It feels like a completely new game entirely.
And you know what? There's also that example, too, where when someone plays one of those older Resident Evil games, when you're in, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You're in a room, it's pre-rendered, but you see one object in there that quite doesn't fit in with the rest.
Yeah. Push this statue, or put this mirror here. Or,
You know that it's an interactive element. You can see that it's that way. The same thing happened with the original Alone in the Dark games, or, you know what? In some cases, in much older examples, Hanna-Barbera cartoons, you'd see that one cartoon cell that was just a little bit different colored compared to everything else. The same thing happened in older video games too, especially ones that use 3D elements and 2D elements together. So with this, what I like is the world is now a fully 3D rendered object. Everything in there is totally 3D rendered, which means that no longer are you limited by that one camera angle, and now any object you see truly is going to be an explorable asset. I mean, you actually mentioned while you were watching it that there was the flashlight there, which is something you typically didn't see in the original.
It seems like there is a lot of play with shadows and light in this. Like I said, this looks, if you had named this like Resident Evil 2.5 or like another numbered Resident Evil, like that would be fine.
Yeah.
Because like it does not seem like it's going to be the same two. Now, we did see some footage of Claire, and Claire was fighting a boss from the original RE2. It was William Birkin. It's the scientist that winds up with I think a version of the T-virus, and he winds up getting this huge eye on his shoulder and stuff. And that gameplay seemed really cool. That boss fight did seem like it harkened back to Resident Evil 2, the original one. But so much else of the footage that we've seen has got me excited because it seems so different.
What I think that's so exciting about this too is, I think that Capcom understands what people are trying to go for and what fans have been really enjoying about Resident Evil lately. So we had this conversation about, do you think that Resident Evil 2 is going to branch off and start making an entirely new, basically follow-up with the series? So are we going to see a remake of Resident Evil 3 that feels like the original Resident Evil 3?
Right, yeah, we were talking about this. So I think we're already in the midst of this path. I think the RE remaster that came out was the beginning. I think that was the seed. Our Resident Evil 2 remake is our first sort of branch from that seed, I would say. One thing that I kind of worry about, though, is like, okay, they wanted to do another version of Resident Evil 2. There's no way that they could put higher textures or just like simply change like the lighting and stuff easily on RE2 and make it look all that great for today, because let's face it, the PlayStation 1, the models and things didn't look all that great. I would say the same thing about RE3. So if we're going to see an RE3 remake, I would say that it would be more like this RE2 remake, and that it's very different. Thing is, with Code Veronica, I feel like we would be getting to that point where it's like, we can just put better textures on there. We can just put better lighting on there, release that, and people would be okay with it. I really hope that Capcom doesn't take that position. I hope they're not just like, they'll buy it.
Well, consider this, right? What the gameplay we're seeing here is clearly inspired by what we've seen from Resident Evil 4.
Yeah, yes,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
So does that mean that once we get to Resident Evil 3, if they choose to do that, are we going to see a full-on remake of Resident Evil 4? Will it be as cheesy? Because there's a lot of cheesiness in there. That there's that one Napoleonic character. You know who I'm talking about, right?
The little dude.
Yeah, not to spoilerize anything, but it has its moments of cheese, right? Like that's the idea that Resident Evil 4 still was following on with that influence from Resident Evil 1 and 2.
Yeah.
But with that being said, do you think that we're going to see a full-on 4 remake coming from this?
So you said you're thinking maybe. I'm saying no. I think if we're going to see a remake of Resident Evil 4, it's going to be maybe in the next console generation. It's going to be a few years because we did get an HD upres of Resident Evil 4 for the PlayStation 4 and for the Xbox One, I believe. It may have been for the PS3, but no, I'm almost positive we had a PS4 version of that game already.
I guarantee you, I believe we have seen that already.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering because we're seeing this attention to detail. I get it. The original Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3, they had those static 2D backgrounds.
Yes.
So once we got into 4, that's where it changed.
Yep.
And maybe we're seeing something that's kind of a catch-up to that, but it's clearly evident to me, at least with Resident Evil 2, we're seeing some much darker sequences on here.
Yes.
And more of an attention to realism. I mean,
we don't know. RE2 has a boss fight with the giant alligator. It could still be in there. If there's a giant alligator in there, I'm saying it's B-movie still.
I'll give you that.
Yeah.
But from what we saw, the dialogue, from the facial animations, from the performances, it looked way more serious.
And Capcom's taken pride in the capture. Like, they're taking real people and doing, like, full-on capture. They were approached about Ada Wong as well, who's a character in Resident Evil 2. And they're not saying a lot about Resident Evil 2, but yeah, they're taking it very, very seriously and going in a very dark and realistic direction.
What we've seen so far of gameplay, they're not showing you as far as we know, they're not showing you later on gameplay.
Not yet.
Because they just showed he's got just into the police station. Leon has at this point, right?
Yep.
So if Leon's just got into the police station at that point, that means it's just pretty much at the beginning of the game, right? So what else is beyond that? Have they really drastically altered the story? Because they could branch the story off.
I think what they're doing right now, Shane, is clever. I think they're showing us the beginning of the game with Leon. Like, it's so, like, everyone has that sort of ingrained in their mind, him going into the original, like the Raccoon Police Station in RE2, like, people kind of remember those moments, and by showing us that, oh no, it's already different, by showing us that within the first, like, 20 or 30 minutes of the game, I think they're kind of telling us, look, yeah, this is going to be very, very different.
I would be very interested in seeing them basically change the story and branch it into a new direction. And 3, I think making a remake of 3 is a cool idea,
and I think it's almost inevitable.
Sure, I want to see them kind of play with that a bit more.
Yeah,
maybe the idea is, so if you've ever played Resident Evil 3, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis has a central enemy who's kind of like hounding you the entire game.
Right, and we do have an enemy in RE2 that's kind of like that. I can't remember his name for the life of me, but he does look a little bit like Nemesis, but he's like very stoic and very huge and lumbering towards you. He has like the trench coat as well. Nemesis kind of is in the same vein as that character. Yeah. But I would really love to see what they do with the Nemesis if they do remake Resident Evil 3.
Because here's the wonderful thing about this. In Resident Evil 3, there was this limitation simply because, like we said, background 2D assets. What if now that you have a 3D engine, he just shows up anywhere, right? That means that at any moment you have to deal with an oncoming threat, which to me would feel very, very similar to what we saw with Alien Isolation, right? Imagine Resident Evil gameplay with Alien Isolation type mechanics.
So, Shane, I'm gonna take you back in time a little bit. In RE3, they did kind of do that.
Oh, I know.
They had random moments where he popped in that weren't exactly concretely scripted.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
What I'm saying
is
push
that.
Yeah, push it to the limit. Like, every area you go in, there's somewhere you can hide or somewhere you can deal with things.
One thing that we have heard about this RE2 remake is that this has the scalable sort of difficulty that RE4 first introduced, in that if you're playing pretty well, I guess the game sort of adapts in a way. And we did hear about that in like Left 4 Dead and stuff. So I want to see how that does play out with RE2.
Yeah.
I'm so excited about this.
Yeah, it looks fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm not a big Resident Evil player myself, as many of you have probably been able to tell by this point, but I got to tell you, this looks really cool. Like, the graphics look amazing. The gameplay looks like as cool as it ever has.
Yeah, tense and dark and moody, and I love to play with light and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be a game that a lot of people are going to want to play. But how about you? Are you a big fan of the Resident Evil series? Do you think that this is looking really cool?
Do you think we're going to see a Resident Evil 3 Nemesis remake? I hope so.
Or would you rather it be a little bit more cheesy and retain the B-movie assets that the originals were so well known for? Let us know what you think.